Hi, my name's Mike Long, and I've been a water specialist for over 35 years. Sometimes we forget how important water is. In fact, it's considered the key to life. Water is second only to the air that we breathe, and it is absolutely necessary for all functions in the human body. Some of the main purposes it serves is as a lubricant for our joints. It is what makes up our saliva. It is what regulates the body temperature. It's how we digest food, and it's how we eliminate waste. So it's a detoxification agent. The human body is mostly made of water. In fact, about 2/3 of our body weight is water. So if you look at the average adult, and you can look at the information here in the slide, many parts of our body are way higher in water than you would think. We all need water every day. Water should be consisting of about 80% of what we drink, and things like coffee, tea, juices, beverages, and about 20% of what we intake from our food. So again, you can see that water is really the key to life. And in fact, if you look at what's going on in terms of space exploration, they keep searching for planets that have water because everything revolves around water. The United Nations came out with a very detailed report several years ago called Sick Water. And it basically said that water everywhere in the world has become sick, and that this is a global crisis that needs attention. So we want to ask this question: why is water sick? Why does the United Nations say that water has become sick everywhere that they look? Well, if you consider the past, there were really only three major types of contaminants in the old days. There was biological contaminants, which are still there: bacteria, virus, parasites. There have been organic chemicals, things like pesticides, herbicides, industrial chemicals. These have been around for a long time. And things called disinfection byproducts. People started putting chlorine into the water over 100 years ago, and the chlorine itself creates a byproduct that is actually toxic. So these disinfection byproducts include trihalomethanes, chloroforms, and things of this nature. Today, though, we have to add three more major types of contaminants that really did not used to exist, at least in the quantities as they do now. One is inorganic minerals and heavy metals. If you consider things like lead, nitrate, arsenic, asbestos, and mercury, these are all heavy metals that are extremely toxic, and they are toxic in incredibly small, very small amounts. One of the other contaminations that is very new is medication, drugs, the things that people take every day all around the world to combat various illnesses: antibiotics, tranquilizers, diabetes medication, high blood pressure medication, painkillers. All of these things are now showing up in the water. They didn't used to be there. And then finally, another emerging contaminant is considered what they call PCP, personal care products. Things like detergents, shampoos, cleansers, things that get into the water supply, and yet we use them every single day. We don't think about them, but someone downstream of introduction to the water source is actually drinking minute amounts of these contaminants. If we take a look first at heavy metal, we know that these are poisonous. We know that they're toxic. They are used worldwide for manufacturing. They are used in automobile batteries, cell phone batteries, laptop computer batteries. Mercury has been used for decades in lamps or in light bulbs, dyes in the paint, chemical fertilizers. All of these things contain toxic heavy metals, and they are incredibly difficult to take out of water. Let me give you just one example that is happening worldwide. If you recall, many years ago, people would talk about leaded gasoline or unleaded gasoline. Well, since lead is such a dangerous contaminant, there was a decision made to switch to manganese. And yet we now know that manganese in itself is a pollutant. And because so much gasoline is used worldwide, the levels of manganese in the water is rising dramatically. Here's a report. This is from Wake Forest University Baptist Medical Center, and a very small sample, but representative of what's going on worldwide. It showed an increase of 28% in colon cancer deaths and 26% in lung cancer deaths that was directly related to the elevation of manganese in the groundwater. So there is a very specific cause and effect relationship. Now, let me make it very clear. This is not just a problem to a specific region or a specific country. This is a worldwide problem. Even in the United States, where I come from, we now recognize that it is a massive problem. There was a city, in fact is a city in Michigan, the state of Michigan, called Flint. And in this city they have found excessive lead levels far beyond what anybody dreamed. And if you go beyond this city of Flint, the government has found 2,000 water systems in 50 different states. That's every state in the United States has a lead problem. 6 million people are drinking water that is contaminated with unacceptable levels of lead. If we look here in Malaysia, where this broadcast is originating from, you can look at dozens and dozens of publications, newspapers, articles that will tell you exactly the same thing. Heavy metal is a major cause of water pollution. I think some of you might be familiar with the issues in the city of Kuantan. This article is almost exactly 1 year ago. Toxins in Kuantan's treated water. And again, this is very specifically related to heavy metal. I would ask you this question. Do you think anything has changed in Kuantan in the last year? Or do you think that these toxins are still there? So it is a big problem, and people everywhere are aware and concerned. One of the things that is often misunderstood or overlooked is the fact that sick water can really cause tremendous problems in the human body. If you look at these nasty looking photos, these are people who drank microscopic amounts of arsenic in the water. This was arsenic that was either naturally occurring or arsenic that was introduced through contamination. And this is the result of what has happened. And again, let me emphasize, these are microscopic amounts of arsenic in the water. Lead is another one. We just discussed a moment ago about the lead problem in the United States. Millions of people facing issues that are related to lead contamination. And I would draw your attention to the bottom of this particular slide. The EPA, and that's Environmental Protection Agency, stresses there is no safe level of lead exposure. And this is from the USA Today national publication. Let me reemphasize, there is no safe level. Not 10 parts per billion, not 5 parts per billion, not even 1 part per billion. It is not safe, and yet it's very, very obvious a problem everywhere. If you look at this sheet that we are posting now, it's called an arsenic fact sheet, and this is from the Water Quality Association. Just have a look at the bottom column there. Potential health effects from consuming water with minute amounts of arsenic. Skin problems, endocrine disruptor, and causes cancer. Skin cancer, bladder cancer, lung cancer, kidney cancer, liver cancer, prostate cancer. And what is considered the safe limit? It's considered to be 10 parts per billion is the maximum allowable, and the goal is 0. Once again, it's like lead. They want it down to 0. In Malaysia, one of the things that we have seen over the years is a huge increase in kidney failure, in kidney disease, kidney problems. In fact, you can look at the slide. A year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, 2.5 million Malaysians suffer from kidney disease. That's almost 10% of the population. A tremendous number of people who are affected with some sort of disorder of the kidneys. If we look even further, we can see that there is a new global threat, and this is drugs in drinking water. Now, I'm not talking about illegal drugs, cocaine and heroin and things like this. I'm talking about the drugs that people take each and every day. We mentioned many of these at the beginning of our broadcast. Things that are so common you wouldn't even think about it. If you go to the clinic and the doctor prescribes an antibiotic, you take the antibiotic. If you have a tremendous amount of pain in your joints, they'll prescribe a painkiller. It ends up in the water. How do these drugs or pharmaceutical products end up in the water? Simple. They pass through our body. Because when you swallow these pharmaceutical drugs, your body uses or metabolizes a certain percentage, but a huge percentage actually passes out of the body and ends up in the water supply. Depending on the type of medication and depending on your state of health, up to 90% actually goes through the body and into the waste stream. That's almost like dumping the tablets straight into the toilet. In fact, that's how a lot of people dispose of medication. Rather than consuming everything that they've been prescribed, they will say, okay, I feel better, and they will dump the rest of the medication into the toilet. Well, where do you think that those medications end up? They end up downstream in another water treatment facility, and that water treatment facility is not able to remove all traces of the drugs. And again, this is a worldwide problem, not confined to just one place, one country, one group of people. Everywhere in the world we see industry, we see governments, we see water utilities grappling with this same issue. Here's an article that is, again, from Malaysia, the New Sunday Times, and this was an article that was published several years ago. The main title is Global Drinking Water Contaminant Exposed Drugs. Please let me emphasize, this is not a localized problem. This is a worldwide problem. I'll give you an example. If one of your loved ones takes heart medication, it's an absolute certainty that some of that heart medication will pass out of their body, go into the waste stream, travel down to the next collection point. The water is processed and cleaned, and it gets delivered to somebody else's house. But there are traces of that medication in the water. And if you look a little bit further at this particular slide, you'll notice the headline on the right says, "All are at risk. Americans drink drugs every day." This is something that is well understood now. This is something that has been around for over 10 to 15 years in terms of awareness. But because these problems are very, very difficult to solve, not as much attention has been paid as it should be. Let me show you another article. I think all of our viewers are familiar with National Geographic magazine. It's one of the most widely read, popular magazines in the world. It has been around for over 110 years. And this is actually straight out of a special issue called Water, Our Thirsty World. This is a cut and paste, no enhancement, of exactly what was found when they took fish from the North Shore Channel in Chicago, a representation of the types of pharmaceutical drugs that were found in these fish. And it's not just the US. There are things like this happening everywhere. Another example, believe it or not, is that when water is used to keep vegetation growing, to keep it green, to make it grow, the pharmaceutical traces actually go into the vegetables. So people who want to think that they are eating organically, they are avoiding as much contamination as possible, this is a potential source of contamination that many people never even dreamed of. And this is an article from a little bit earlier this year. So these are things that are emerging. These are things that people are just now beginning to wake up to. And I think the full scale of impact on people has really not even been considered. One of the other problems that we see are synthetic organic chemicals. Now, the numbers that I'm going to read, and you can look on the slide yourself, are absolutely staggering, but they are true. Synthetic organic chemicals or compounds number in the tens of millions. Every single day to the Register of Chemical Abstracts in Columbus, Ohio, there are 4,000 new synthetic organic chemicals or compounds that are added every single day. 3,000 of these are considered high volume production, meaning more than 1 million pounds a year of these 3,000 organic chemicals are produced and placed into the mainstream of America. Here's a more disturbing factor. 62,000 of these chemicals are considered as potential endocrine disrupting compounds. In other words, they change the body's immune system, they change the body's behavior system, they even cause changes in the reproductive system of humans and of animals. And again, this is not a scare story, this is not a fear tactic, this is absolute documented scientific fact. So these are just a few of the points that we need to consider when we talk about drinking water and its purity or its lack of purity. Just a little bit further on this issue of the 62,000 different chemicals. that the EPA has identified as endocrine disruptors, or EDCs. Things like shampoo, things like detergents, things like soap, the heavy metals that we talked about earlier. All of these things contribute to this massive load of contamination that's going into the water. Even things like toothpaste. You may not realize it, but toothpaste contains fluoride. Fluoride is a toxin. Fluoride is a deadly poison. And yet tiny amounts are put into toothpaste, so theoretically it helps people avoid getting cavities. But again, the load that goes into the water supply becomes tremendous. So there are so many points of concern. There are so many things that we can talk about. We just don't have time to consider them all today. Let me just show you a few more slides on this issue. They have found that male fish are now showing up with female organs, and they are a direct result of these endocrine disrupting compounds or chemicals. On the right side of your slide here, you can actually see the article in Bahasa Melayu talking about male fish with female sex organs. This on the left side was a cartoon from many years ago when they first started recognizing that this was a problem. But it's no longer a joke. We can write cartoons about it, but can you imagine the effect that this is having on the human body? In the United States, there was a television special that actually pointed out that up to 50% of men may be somewhat sterile due to very low sperm count, unable to have children. Why? Because of these endocrine disrupting chemicals and compounds that are in the water. One of the last things that I want to talk about before we end this particular webinar is the body's immune system. Our immune system is designed to protect us. It's designed to keep us from sickness, from disease, from illness. And as we mentioned, these endocrine disrupting chemicals change what happens that's going on inside the body. Give you some very few quick facts. One, it used to be that autoimmune diseases were quite unknown, quite rare. Today, if you look at things like rheumatoid arthritis, if you look at things like asthma, if you look at things like diabetes, if you look at things that today are affecting people worldwide, it is absolutely astounding. And the rise in the number of people being affected by the over 50 different autoimmune diseases is absolutely incredible. So what is it that is happening? Read with me on the right side of your slide. Endocrine disruptors mimic the real natural estrogen and wreck the body. How? By blocking the estrogen receptor site and preventing the natural estrogen from doing its job, and by sending the wrong signals between cells. So simply put, your immune system gets the wrong signal and it begins fighting itself. It begins destroying itself. And this is what we call autoimmune disease. And the incidence worldwide has skyrocketed. One of the doctors I was working with in northeastern India said that more than half of the patients she sees have one form or another of autoimmune disease. This is in a remote area of India where you would not expect there to be such heavy contamination and pollution. But remember, it takes just microscopic amounts of these heavy metals, of these endocrine disrupting chemicals, of these personal care products, of all of these things, such a small amount can cause such havoc in the body. So, again, it sounds somewhat alarming, and in fact, it is alarming. People should be living better lives. People should be getting healthier. But we are seeing almost the opposite take place. Increased cancer, increased autoimmune diseases, increased problems with kidneys and with the body's organs, and a huge, huge number of these problems can be directly attributed to contaminated water. In subsequent webinars, we are going to give you much more information. We are going to discuss with you the ways that you can ensure that you, your loved ones, your friends, and your family are not ingesting these chemicals, these compounds, these metals, these microorganisms. How you can protect yourself, how you can enhance your immune system. So I would ask that you stay tuned, keep checking your websites, keep checking your information sites, because again, within the next 1 or 2 months, we will schedule another webinar and we will give you some further information, not just on the magnitude and scope of the problem, but more importantly, how to solve the problem and how not to be cheated or tricked by people who claim to have a solution, but they're just trying to take your money. So thank you all for watching. I hope to see you again in another broadcast very soon.